Have you ever noticed the quiet strength in a man's eyes, a depth that hints at unseen burdens carried not for himself, but for the delicate ecosystem of the hearts around him? It is a silent pact many men unknowingly make, a sacrifice woven into the fabric of their being, to absorb the anxieties, the fears, the sharp edges of the emotional world, so that others might know a semblance of peace. Consider the tale of Theron, a village elder in the remote valleys where mist kissed the terraced rice paddies. Theron was not a man of grand pronouncements or booming laughter, but his presence was a steadying force, much like the ancient banyan tree in the village square. His wife, Elias, possessed a spirit as vibrant and unpredictable as the monsoon rains. Her joys were effusive, her sorrows like sudden squalls. Theron, with a gentle understanding that transcended mere patience, became her anchor. When Elias's younger brother lost his meager harvest to a late frost, her despair threatened to engulf her. Theron, without a word of complaint, took on extra work mending fishing nets and tending to the communal livestock, ensuring Elias had the resources to send aid, all while masking his own quiet exhaustion. His son, Carl, a young man wrestling with the expectations of tradition and the pull of a wider world, often clashed with Elias's more rigid views. These disagreements, though seldom spoken aloud to Theron, weighed heavily on him. He navigated the unspoken tensions like a seasoned diplomat, offering subtle words of encouragement to Carl in private and gently reminding Elias of the changing times. He carried the weight of their individual struggles, their unspoken anxieties about the future of their small community nestled amidst the towering peaks of Lai Chau, without ever revealing the strain it placed upon him. In the evenings, as the family gathered around the hearth, Elias would recount her day, her voice filled with the day's triumphs and tribulations. Carl would often remain quiet, his inner turmoil a palpable presence. Theron would listen intently, his gaze moving between them, absorbing the unspoken undercurrents. He would offer a calming word here, a gentle smile there, deflecting potential conflict with a quiet grace. He carried the burden of maintaining harmony, of ensuring that the small circle of his family remained unbroken, even as individual storms raged within. Years passed in this manner. Elias, buoyed by Theron's unwavering support, continued to navigate life with her characteristic passion. Carl eventually found his path, venturing to the city for work but returning often, his youthful rebelliousness softened by time and distance. It was only after Theron's passing, a quiet fading like the last light of dusk, that Elias and Carl truly understood the magnitude of his silent sacrifice. Elias found herself overwhelmed by anxieties that Theron had always subtly shielded her from. Carl, now bearing the responsibilities of the family, recognized the countless small compromises his father had made, the unspoken understanding that had held their family together. They began to see the intricate web of emotional support Theron had woven, a web they had unknowingly relied upon. Theron, in his quiet stoicism, embodied the archetype of the silent guardian, a figure often found in the periphery, absorbing the chaos so that others can flourish. His actions were not born of weakness or a lack of personal desire, but from a deep-seated sense of responsibility and love. He carried the collective shadow of his family, the unspoken fears and frustrations, allowing them to move through life with a lighter step. You, too, might know someone like Theron, or perhaps you recognize this tendency within yourself. This quiet burden-bearing can become a heavy weight, leading to unseen exhaustion and a stifling of one's own needs. Remember the principles of individuation championed by Jung. True wholeness comes not from suppressing parts of ourselves, but from integrating them. It is essential to acknowledge your own emotional landscape, to allow your vulnerabilities to surface, and to communicate your needs. Just as the banyan tree needs strong roots and a healthy trunk to support its expansive branches, so too do you need to nurture your own well-being to truly support others. Allow yourself to be seen, to be heard, not just as the anchor, but as an individual with your own storms and sunshine. Embrace the strength in vulnerability, and understand that true peace is a shared endeavor, not a solitary burden. What if a man's greatest act of strength is not in bearing the world's weight silently, but in confronting the echoes of unexpressed desire, the ghost of a life unlived, all for the sake of preserving another's carefully constructed reality? This is the unseen burden of unfulfilled dreams, often buried beneath layers of duty and expectation. Consider the story of Elias, a master craftsman whose hands could coax beauty from raw wood, whose mind, however, yearned for the boundless expanse of the sea. Elias lived in a bustling port town, his days filled with the rhythm of hammer and chisel, the scent of sawdust his constant companion. His wife, Lena, was a woman of delicate constitution and a deep-seated fear of change. Her world was her home, her garden, and the familiar faces of their small community. Elias loved Lena deeply, her gentle spirit a balm to his often restless soul. Yet, a part of him, an untamed animus within, yearned for the ocean, for the salty spray on his face, for the endless horizon that promised adventure and discovery. He had once dreamed of sailing to distant lands, of charting new constellations, of feeling the immense power of the waves beneath a ship's keel. But Lena's anxieties were palpable. The mere mention of a journey beyond the town's harbor would bring a tremor to her voice, a pallor to her cheeks. She found comfort in routine, in predictability, and Elias, seeing her fragile peace, slowly began to anchor his own dreams. He built Lena a beautiful conservatory, a miniature world of exotic plants, a garden under glass that mirrored the safe, contained life she cherished. His hands, though skilled, now shaped wood for others' needs, for sturdy furniture and ornate carvings, never for the sleek lines of a seagoing vessel of his own. He channeled his yearning into these creations, imbuing them with a quiet longing that only he could perceive. The town prospered, and Elias's reputation as a craftsman grew. His days were full, his life outwardly rich with the respect of his peers and the quiet contentment of Lena. Yet, in the deep hours of the night, when the moon cast long shadows across their sleeping village, Elias would sometimes stand by his window, gazing at the distant gleam of the harbor lights. He would imagine the creak of the mast, the snap of the sails, the vast, liberating emptiness of the open sea. He never spoke of these moments to Lena. He couldn't bear to disrupt her serenity, to introduce the discomfort of his unfulfilled aspirations into her carefully ordered world. He believed it was his duty, his quiet act of love, to shield her from the turbulence of his own spirit. This unspoken sacrifice, this gentle suppression of his deepest desires, became a shadow companion, walking beside him unseen by others. One day, a grizzled old sailor, a man whose face was weathered by sun and salt, commissioned Elias to build him a small, sturdy boat. As Elias worked, the sailor would tell tales of distant ports, of whales breaching in sapphire waters, of stars so bright they seemed to whisper secrets. Elias listened, his hands shaping the wood, his heart aching with a familiar, suppressed ache. The boat, when finished, was a masterpiece, a vessel built not just with skill, but with the silent echoes of a deferred dream. As the sailor prepared to embark, he looked at Elias with knowing eyes. "Some dreams," he said, his voice raspy, "are meant to be lived, not just imagined." Elias merely nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips, but the sailor's words lingered, a subtle tremor in the carefully built dam of his composure. Elias's journey was one of the unsung dreamer, an archetype who, out of love or duty, chooses to sublimate their own profound desires to maintain the stability and peace of another. This isn't weakness. It's a profound, often heartbreaking, act of self-effacement. Yet, it also speaks to the danger of unacknowledged shadows within the psyche. Jungian thought reminds us that denying a fundamental aspect of the self, like Elias's deep yearning for exploration, does not make it disappear. Instead, it retreats into the shadow, manifesting in subtle melancholies, a quiet resignation, or even unexplained dis-ease. To you, who might recognize this echo within your own soul, the message is clear. True love and authentic connection are not built on suppression, but on courageous integration. It is not selfish to acknowledge and pursue your own authentic desires. In fact, when a man continuously sacrifices his deepest aspirations for the perceived comfort of another, he inadvertently diminishes himself, and by extension, the very relationship he seeks to protect. Just as Epictetus spoke of focusing on what is within your control, you have the power to engage with your inner landscape, to bring your latent desires into the light of consciousness. Begin the work of shadow integration by exploring what you have denied yourself. What dreams have you deferred? What passions have you muted for the sake of another's peace? Gently, courageously, begin to reclaim those pieces of yourself. True strength lies not in the endless carrying of burdens, but in the radical act of self-acceptance and the brave pursuit of an authentic life, even if it means navigating initial discomfort. Your peace, your wholeness, is not a luxury. It is the foundation upon which truly flourishing relationships are built. Has it ever struck you that a man's deepest regrets often stem not from his failures, but from the choices he made to uphold an unspoken ideal, a societal expectation that demanded he be a rock impervious to his own inner tremors? This is the profound sorrow of the unmourned loss, the quiet grief carried when a relationship ends, and he is expected to simply move on, for the sake of everyone else's comfort. Let us turn now to the journey of Arthur, a man of quiet dignity and considerable success in the bustling heart of a modern metropolis. Arthur had built an impressive career, a beautiful home, and a life that, on the surface, seemed utterly complete. His marriage to Eleanor had been a cornerstone of that life for 20 years. Their connection was one of shared history, comfortable routines, and a deep, abiding respect. Yet, as years turned into decades, a subtle disconnect began to form, a widening gyre of individual paths that, while not overtly contentious, slowly drifted apart. The separation, when it came, was amicable, even mature. There were no dramatic arguments, no bitter accusations. It was a mutual acknowledgement that the intricate tapestry of their lives had simply unraveled, thread by individual thread. Eleanor, a woman of great social grace, found solace in her extensive network of friends, in support groups, and in the quiet introspection that allowed her to articulate her pain and process her grief. Arthur, however, found himself in a different silent chamber. Society, subtly and overtly, often places an almost impossible burden on men during times of relational dissolution. He was expected to be stoic, to be the strong one, to demonstrate resilience. Friends offered pats on the back and vague assurances that he would bounce back. Colleagues spoke of moving forward, of new beginnings. There was little space, no comfortable embrace, for the slow, agonizing process of mourning a significant loss. Arthur continued his work with unwavering focus, his public demeanor unchanged. He went to the gym, attended social functions, and maintained his routines with a disciplined precision that masked a cavernous ache within. He felt the absence of Eleanor's presence in the quiet moments, the empty chair at the breakfast table, the silence in the evenings after a long day, the sudden, sharp pang of memory triggered by a familiar scent or a forgotten photograph. These were not just memories of a relationship, but of a shared identity, a future envisioned together that now lay shattered. He found himself unable to articulate this profound sense of loss. How could he explain the grief for something that was not a death, but felt every bit as final? How could he admit to the crushing loneliness when everyone expected him to be unaffected, to be the unyielding masculine presence they knew? He tried to power through, drawing on a lifetime of conditioning that taught him to suppress emotion, to be logical, to control his inner world. He buried himself in work, in solitary hobbies, in anything that would distract him from the swirling vortex of unacknowledged sorrow. Yet, the shadow of unexpressed grief grew heavier, manifesting as a subtle irritability, a persistent fatigue, and an inexplicable sense of emptiness despite his outward achievements. He was caught in a psychological bind. The masculine archetype of the unshakable provider, the protector, clashed violently with the deeply human need to mourn, to feel, to be vulnerable. This internal conflict, this refusal to acknowledge and integrate his shadow of sorrow, chipped away at his spirit, leaving him feeling profoundly isolated. Arthur's story illuminates the archetype of the Stoic Mourner, a man who internalizes grief, believing it to be a burden too heavy or too unmanly to share. His experience underscores a critical aspect of psychological well-being, the necessity of shadow work in healing. When society or personal conditioning dictates that certain emotions, particularly sadness, vulnerability, or perceived weakness, are unacceptable for men. These emotions do not simply vanish. They retreat into the unconscious, forming a shadow that can subtly, yet powerfully, undermine one's peace and sense of self-worth. Arthur's quiet despair was an accumulation of unmourned losses, not just of his marriage, but of the very idea that he was permitted to grieve openly. To you, observing or experiencing similar silent struggles, understand this profound truth. Healing pain requires authentic engagement with it. True strength is not the absence of emotion, but the courageous willingness to feel it, to acknowledge it, and to process it. Just as Seneca taught the importance of facing adversity with reason, modern psychology reminds us that true resilience comes from understanding and integrating our emotional experiences, not from denying them. It is imperative to create space for men to mourn, to process, and to express their deepest feelings without judgment. If you are carrying such a burden, begin the journey of individuation by recognizing that your emotional landscape is valid, complex, and deserving of exploration. Seek out spaces, trusted confidants, or professional guidance where you can shed the mantle of enforced stoicism. Allow yourself the grace of vulnerability. Let the tears fall if they must. Let the anger surface. Let the confusion simply be. This is not weakness. It is the ultimate act of courage. It is in embracing the full spectrum of your humanity, including your grief and vulnerability, that you unlock true internal freedom and genuine self-worth. Release the need for external validation of your strength. Your peace comes from within, from the radical acceptance of your authentic self, flaws and all. Let go of the quiet expectations and embrace the power of your own stillness, a stillness born not of suppression, but of profound integration and rebirth. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others to spread positive values in life. The end.